is a class 3 for today in a small bit. Now we will try to explain in detail what are we expected to write in this reaction after the overview class. So let us take the enzyme fifth reaction catalyzed by glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase. As you can see, it is a two reaction. One is oxidation and the one is phosphorylation. So basically, here two things are happening. Oxidation. What is getting oxidized? Aldehyde. Aldehyde is getting oxidized to glyceric acid. Glyceraldehyde is getting oxidized to glyceric acid. When we say the word oxidize, that means glyceraldehyde is losing two electrons. Well, it cannot just lose electrons into the cytosol. There should be some electron acceptor. That electron acceptor is none other than NAD+. Can you see the plus mark? It indicates that it can be satisfied or completely reduced by accepting two electrons. So when it takes up those two electrons, it becomes NADH plus H plus. Okay, so H plus is a hydride ion. Okay, another H plus that you see. So it's basically a hydride ion. So basically what happens in the fifth step, you are doing two things. One, you are oxidizing glyceraldehyde to glyceric acid. At the same time, you are generating NADH. And from the cytosolic inorganic phosphate, you are phosphorylating also. It is a reversible reaction and it can be inhibited by a product called as iodoacetate, which is one of the most important what is a challenging drug trial going on to see that if this can be used in as a cancer treatment as well. Let us go back to the structure to know a little more in detail. The question that arises is there any significance of NAD plus being utilized in this particular stage? Usually, remember that in the cytosol, the concentration of NAD plus is always low. You can have good concentration of NADH in the cytosol, but not good concentration of NAD plus. I will stress this point over here when we will discuss the next class of fate of pyruvate in anaerobic. I will ask you the question to link today's class with the another class. Okay. So once again, listen carefully what I mean to say. In the cytosol, NAD plus concentration is very less and it needs to be replenished regularly if the glycolysis has to move ahead without any hiccup. Okay, so we'll stop at this, correlate when the right time strikes. So next is the sixth step catalyzed, that is ultimately we formed 1,3-biphosphoglyceride and have already explained why we call it as so. No doubt by glyceraldehyde oxidation we created glyceric acid, but since there was a phosphate group present at the third position, we called it as phosphoglyceric acid. And since by phosphorylation we added one more phosphate group, now we had phosphate at first position and three position, which were not in continuity. So that's why the name of our product is 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Then why don't we call it as glyceric acid? Is because if they remain in their ionic state, we usually call it by their ionic names, that is glycerate and not glyceric acid. Now what happens to this one? This has a phosphate group at first position which is highly unstable and it becomes a high energy phosphate group doning compound which is ready to give away its phosphate group, and it will do so by giving out the first phosphorylation step and by catalyzed by the enzyme phosphoglycerate kinase, utilizing two ADP molecules and generating two ATP molecules. The product that is formed is 3-phosphoglycerate. Now, seventh step is intramolecular rearrangement happens via 2,3-DPG requiring magnesium plus 2 and a a mutase enzyme steps in, which is phosphoglycerate mutase, and will generate 2-phosphoglycerate from 3-phosphoglycerate. I had even mentioned earlier, this cannot happen as easier as it has an intermediate product, which is nothing but 2,3-BPG. Now, you might have heard this 2,3-BPG earlier also, and we will come and address this particular 2,3-BPG once again more in detail. What is its significance? But just now you remember this 2,3-BPG molecule that has been formed here is a very transient molecule. Means what? It happens for temporary moment only and immediately gets rearranged, molecular rearranged into 2-phosphoglycerate. Now you have 2-phosphoglycerate. You will have to generate another high for energy compound. So steps in at the eighth enzyme enolase, which will catalyze dehydration or removal of water molecule to form enol. Now, this is very important because enolase enzyme can be inhibited by fluoride. Hence, when in labs, I want to do a blood glucose estimation and it will, if it is going to be delayed, then I will collect the blood of my patient in sodium fluoride tubes. The reason is I don't want all of my glucose to be utilized by the RBCs, leukocytes, WBCs present, all the cells present in the blood. And ultimately, when I estimate, I should not get a very low glucose value. So I will add fluoride, which I know will inhibit enolase and will block the glycolysis in all the cells. Hence, whatever glucose I will estimate will be exactly same as it is, quite approximately same as it is in the patient's body system. Okay, so that is a very important clinical significance pertaining to enolase. What it is? Use of sodium fluoride tubes for blood glucose estimation. Last but one step, high energy phosphate group present in the phosphoenol pyruvate is now unstable, wants to give away that phospho group, and acceptor happens to be ADP, and this is our second substrate level phosphorylation, which will generate ATP, giving us ultimately our final aerobic end product, that is pyruvate. In the next class, we will see what are the fates of pyruvate depending upon aerobic and anaerobic status. Thank you.